Can a background actor really mess up a whole scene? Well, no, probably not, but that didn't stop these guys from trying. Much of the appeal of Raiders of the Lost Ark comes from how well it combines the old and the new. Indiana Jones' first outing drew heavily from the globe-trotting serials of the 1930s, but employed more modern storytelling sensibilities. One iconic scene in particular struck a chord with audiences after subverting expectations in the most shocking way. When Indy winds up on a street outside a market in Cairo, a figure with impressive sword skills challenges him to a battle. Instead, well, just as famous as the scene itself is the fact that Indy's solution was suggested by Harrison Ford, who was sick with dysentery and just wanted to get it all over with. And perhaps that haste explains why they didn't retake the scene after noticing what one extra was up to. Everyone stops to watch as Indy faces his opponent, but one butcher keeps on working in a stall right behind him, slowly and rhythmically bringing a knife down over a slab of meat. Yet he never actually cuts it, almost as if he's happy just practicing his moves. Mr. Nanny is a largely forgettable movie, although it might be worth a watch if you really badly want to see the late Hulk Hogan debasing himself for a payday. Still, there's one scene that's definitely worth watching, if not for the right reasons. As Hulk Hogan is riding his bike through the city, he passes a shoreline where someone clearly is seen throwing a dog into the water. No, we don't know either. What's even creepier is that, as far as anyone knows, that wasn't actually an extra. It seems some random guy was there that day and just decided he wanted to chuck his pooch into the ocean. Sadly, nobody has ever come forward to admit that this was them. Why? Maybe he's on the run for his crimes against canines, or maybe he never realized he was in the movie in the first place. After all, the only way he could have found that out was by watching it. And, well, you know. Background actors in crowd scenes are supposed to become a kind of vague muddle of faces and arms, and no one person should ever attract more focus than the others. That message appeared lost on one extra from the 1976 dystopian sci-fi movie Logan's Run, however. In the final moments of the film, the survivors celebrate when they meet the world's oldest living man. While most of the extras wave, raise their arms in triumph, or try to touch the man, one actor decides to give him the Vulcan hand gesture from Star Trek, despite the fact that he's right in the center of the frame. Based on a true story, the 2005 sports drama Coach Carter follows Ken Carter, a man who returns to his alma mater to coach a lazy and disrespectful basketball team. To teach his new students the values of hard work and personal responsibility, Carter institutes a minimum GPA requirement to play on the team. Later, after he catches some of his players at a party and finds out that many are still pulling terrible grades, he locks them out of the gym, later shutting down the whole season.
We have failed.
Obviously, the kids aren't all right with this. During one scene, Carter posts a sign declaring a game canceled, and he's surrounded by dozens of teenagers who scream their displeasure right into his face. Among them, though, one young man sticks out. He looks like he read someplace that when you show anger in a movie, you let out a goofy no while shaking your fist in the air like an old man yelling at a cloud. Now that's acting. Back in the early 2000s, The Fast and the Furious launched a whole traffic jam of imitators, movies in which fancy vehicles are driven with utmost neglect while young men explore their moody, melodramatic relationships. Take 2003's Biker Boyz, for example, in which an LA motorcycle racer attempts to avenge his father's competitive loss by winning the title himself. Derek Luke stars as the kid, and toward the end of the movie, all seems lost after he completely destroys his racing bike. As he attempts to reckon with this setback on the racetrack lot, though, there seems to be a whole nother situation going on behind him. In an adjacent lot, an employee of a local business is sweeping the premises with not a care in the world. It's honestly hard to tell why this extra is even here. There's not even any visible trash or dirt on the ground that needs to be cleaned up. Instead, he just kinda shuffles around, aggressively moving the broom back and forth in a sweeping motion, but quite obviously never touching the ground with the tool. But hey, it's a living.
Hey everyone.
Tom Holland will probably be forever associated with Spidey and the MCU. By probably, we mean obviously, but he does sometimes appear in movies that don't have any capes. In fact, he's been involved in some much harder-hitting fare in recent years, such as the 2021 film Cherry. Holland played the title character, a man who becomes a military medic during the Iraq War. Upon his discharge, Cherry struggles with addiction and PTSD, and soon finds himself dragged into a life of crime. Gritty? You betcha. But it seems even a movie like this can't outrun the shadow of the wall crawler. In one surreal scene, Cherry lies on the ground while other uniformed soldiers swarm around him, but two of the extras in the scene just can't seem to take the moment or Holland seriously. Instead, they can be seen goofing around by pretending they're shooting webs out of their wrists. Writing on Reddit after the film's release, someone who claimed they had performed as an extra in the scene wrote that the crew told them to act weird and chaotic. It's fair to assume then that two of those extras took this as a chance to live out their deepest superhero fantasies. An extremely convoluted science fiction action movie set on Mars in the year 2084. Total Recall follows the Earthling Quaid as he travels to the Red Planet to thwart a totalitarian industrial conspiracy. At the end of the movie, he blows up an alien-made reactor, flooding Mars with fresh air and annihilating the planet's mining operations. When that big moment comes, you might expect that the filmmakers would have made sure that every detail was just right. Alas, no. During that final sequence, a bunch of people are sitting in a futuristic-looking cafeteria. The explosion visible in big windows behind them, triggering the reactor, also set off a planet-wide earthquake, and two of these extras decide to help things along by shaking themselves, their chairs, and their table by hand. You know, just to really hammer it home. The 2000 film The Patriot aimed to humanize the myth of the American Revolution, reminding audiences that real people fought a real war, and that even they had their fears about taking up arms against the British military.
Aim small, miss small.
There's nothing more human than death, of course, and The Patriot has plenty of it. More than 120 characters are killed across the film's 165 minutes, and that doesn't even include the countless soldiers portrayed by extras. Still, thanks to one botched scene, we can bring that casualty count down by one. After a violent skirmish, the body of a British soldier is shown dead and slumped over the reins of a covered carriage. As the scene fades to black, however, the background actor portraying the soldier starts to get up. In fairness, this one's probably on the editor for cutting the scene too late. Still, would it have killed that guy to stay down for a couple more seconds? The 2004 boxing drama $1 Million Baby is a classic of the genre. In one particularly visceral and memorable fight sequence, though, Maggie Fitzgerald's enthusiasm is matched only by that of one of her fans. It makes sense that the crowd would be worked into a frenzy by Maggie's prowess, and in this scene they are. But one fan in particular is clearly overwhelmed by what he's just seen. Jumping, clapping, grinning, and high-fiving. Interestingly, Eastwood not only kept this footage in the final edit, but actually framed the shot with himself and Swank opposite the overzealous man. Quite rightly regarded as an all-time classic, Star Wars is pretty much a perfect movie. It's got action, adventure, good versus evil, space stuff, romance, and a whole cast of unforgettable characters.
Hello there.
That said, it's not all perfect. In fact, Star Wars made it all the way to movie theaters with a blooper included in the final cut, one that has since become arguably the most famous movie mistake of all time.
We're doomed.
And it all comes down to these guys. As the rank-and-file shock troops of the Galactic Empire, stormtroopers aren't meant to stand out from the crowd. Yet, by total accident, one of them managed to march his way right into the history books. After Luke Skywalker and the other heroes infiltrate the Death Star, a small battalion of stormtroopers come across C-3PO and R2-D2's hiding place. At one point, they enter a room as the electronic door rises in front of them, and one trooper bonks his head on it as they pass through. It didn't take long for people to notice this, of course, and the gaffe soon became so beloved by Star Wars fans that Lucas actually added in a sound effect on later home releases.
Take over. Need to hit.
Everyone loves the stormtrooper who bonked his head on that door. For our money, though, the best extra in Star Wars history is this guy from Return of the Jedi, who was so excited for Luke Skywalker to kick him in the face that he just couldn't wait to react. As Luke is battling Jabba the Hutt's cronies over the Sarlacc pit, he goes to kick one in the face, except he doesn't even come close. Despite a good 6 inches of air between foot and head, Jabba's henchmen react like Bruce Lee hit him square in the nose. Why Richard Marquand didn't immediately yell cut and remind the guy he was supposed to make it look like a real fight, we'll never know. This wasn't even background work. Luke and his overly dramatic enemy were front and center here, with nothing other than an errant Boba Fett to draw the eye. Of course, Star Wars fans being Star Wars fans, some have since attempted to retcon this moment as a force kick. This isn't canon in the brave new Disney-fied world of Star Wars, but it did at least appear as an ability in the MMO Star Wars The Old Republic, so that's neat.
1985's Teen Wolf had a little something extra for audiences. In the final scene, Michael J. Fox wins the basketball game, kisses the girl, and the crowd goes, Nuts? Wait, is that guy standing in the back of the bleachers with his fly down and all his team spirit hanging out? Well, maybe not. Thanks to a lot of people with too much time on their hands, it turns out that this probably isn't the little teen wolf so many thought they saw. In fact, it might not even be a man at all. So far, the extra hasn't come forward to let us all in on the truth of what happened in those bleachers. But good luck watching the end of Teen Wolf again without noticing it. Remember that heartwarming scene in the conclusion of Back to the Future 3? Good old Doc Brown surprises Marty by returning to 1985 to let him know he survived and all is well. We get to see Clara again and learn of her marriage, but best of all, we are introduced to Jules and Vern, their 2 young children. And then, this.
It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has.
Did you spot it? Check out Daniel Evans, who plays Vern, motion to someone off camera and start pointing at his junk. He probably just had to pee, but still, it's a wonder this shot made it through editing. Thanks to some visually challenged editors, Vern's not-so-great Scott took center stage at the worst of times. Remember how the trick to being a good extra is not getting noticed? Apparently, the guy in this shot from 1984's Ghostbusters didn't get the memo.
I like that shirt, Brad.
Clearly, the extras were told to act excited, but this guy goes way over the top. If you look for him throughout the whole movie, you can see him pop up in other places too, like the end credits and this scene where he starts jumping like a lunatic when the Ghostbusters arrive. Hard to tell if he's the world's worst extra or the Ghostbusters' biggest fan. Let's go with both. One of the most difficult aspects of any action film is getting the fighting to look realistic while making sure that nobody gets hurt. Sometimes it doesn't work out. During the fight scene with Catwoman and Batman in The Dark Knight Rises, you can clearly see a guy in the background who decides it'd be best to get hit without actually getting hit. He gets about 4 feet away from the Caped Crusader and throws himself backward for no reason. How does that even happen?
You saw it yourself, Robin. The slightest impact was sufficient to instantly reduce them to antimatter.
Nice try, Batman. Next time, just screen out the bad extras during auditions. Enter the Dragon is a groundbreaking martial arts film starring Bruce Lee at the peak of his career of ass-kicking. But apparently, even that wasn't enough to impress one extra. In a scene where a group of guys are watching Bruce Lee kick the snot out of someone, a background player who should be stoically standing still starts cracking up. It's totally out of place for the scene. But once you know it's there, all of Bruce Lee's bone-cracking kicks disappear, and this one giggling extra is all you'll ever see. Toward the end of Hitchcock's classic North by Northwest, an important scene takes place where Eva Marie Saint points a gun at Cary Grant and fires. If you look closely at the boy sitting down directly behind Saint in the shot, he clearly covers his ears before the gun goes off. It's another one of those things where, if you catch it, it kinda ruins the scene forever. But maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe the audience is supposed to know that Saint's character is going to pull a gun and fire at Grant. Because, well, thinking about Hitchcock's legendary attention to detail, it must have been, foreshadowing. To hint to the audience that,
oh, what a load of crap!
Yeah, never mind. That kid sucks. Imagine you're an extra on Jaws, and you're told that you need to look freaked out because a gigantic, aquatic monster has just eaten a little boy. That's probably about the only instruction most extras needed, but there was one guy who clearly thought differently. Because instead of screaming for his imaginary children, he's giggling like a little kid. Worst of all, he's pretty much center frame and right in the camera for a few seconds of infamy. Maybe he thought he was in Sharknado? Yeah, that was probably it.
In this serious scene from Everything Must Go, 2 adults are talking on a porch while 2 children sit on the lawn. Something must have happened between takes, because it seems like those kids were told to sit quietly and not be distracting. Being kids, it looks like they took their instructions a bit too seriously. They're not even moving. For the record, this is not a composite shot. Those kids are actually just holding perfectly still. They worked so hard to not distract the audience that they ended up doing just that. Can't fault them for trying, though. We know that Quantum of Solace was made during the writer's strike, but there's no excuse for this extra. If you look closely, you'll see that the guy with the broom either never learned how to sweep, or he knows something we all don't. There's no reason why his broom would be so high above the ground. Perhaps he thought since he wasn't getting paid to sweep, he didn't actually have to. He ends up drawing precious attention away from James Bond, which is just plain wrong. If you've ever fought an ape, you probably lost because they're super strong. If you haven't, don't. Once again, because they're super strong. One extra from the original Planet of the Apes clearly didn't know that apes are super strong. As the other angry apes chuck fruits and vegetables at Charlton Heston, this guy couldn't be bothered. He tosses his veggie in a bored, limp-wristed, and totally ineffective way. Since the produce was probably made out of foam, there's no way this actor was worried about actually hurting Heston. Either this was a troll having a laugh, or someone needs to stop skipping wrist day at the gym. It's clear that in this scene from Goodfellas, the one extra who had the privilege of sitting just over Robert De Niro's shoulder was explicitly told not to look at the camera. In every shot, this man turns his head to look in a different direction, looking anywhere but down the lens.
I say to you, don't think about elephants. What are you thinking about?
Elephants.
This poor extra is making every possible effort to look away from the camera, when it seems like that's all he wants to do. Don't give in, hungry man. Telling the tale of the legendary William Wallace, Braveheart is full of epic battles across sweeping, beautiful landscapes. Hundreds of extras were required to give it their all as Wallace's fearless, passionate army fighting for their homeland. But one extra must have missed that memo. Dressed in orange, you can clearly see him attempt a lunge at his opponent with all the energy of an exhausted retail worker at the end of their shift. We get it, battles are hard, and a soldier's bound to get tired, but you'd think the director could have hidden this extra better instead of putting him in plain sight. When you're an extra, you should always do your best to keep your cool, regardless of how epic the scene around you is. You should be engaged in the action, but not overtly so. Basically, you should do the opposite of what these two extras did in The Return of the Musketeers. When a musketeer shows off a treasure chest full of loot, the man and woman just over his shoulder start pulling faces like crazy, the man grinning like a maniac while the woman struggles to stay in frame, perhaps so she could have some footage to use in her reel. While she eventually gives up, the man's crazy mugging continues. Since this is clearly his only 15 seconds of fame, you can almost sympathize with him. It's tough to bring levity to a World War II movie, but one Dunkirk extra did his best. This shot features a group of Allied soldiers looking up at an incoming squadron of Nazi fighter jets. But check out the soldier to the right. He doesn't look like an army is flying in to kill him. His smirk and sleepy eyes suggest he's more like a baked college kid than a soldier fearing for his life. Does one extra reacting to a Nazi invasion like it's some mediocre air show ruin Dunkirk? Hardly. But it does make you wonder how that footage made the trailer, let alone the final film. One extra in Robocop 2 was doing so well until he wasn't. That is, he did what he was supposed to do, only he forgot to stop. This extra was one of dozens booing and jeering at a man taking a stand. The man eventually headed back to his seat, but our extra wasn't done. He kept on shouting and angrily gesturing for the man to sit down, like a parent who still yells at their kid after putting them in timeout.
Shame! Shame!
Perhaps he thought he was being dramatic, but he ended up just looking silly. He clearly was going back to his seat. You really didn't have to keep waving your arm like that.